Hello, everyone. This is Kerwin, and welcome to another episode of What's Happening in Travel. My buddy Kushro is not here today, so it's just me. Um, it's been a heck of a week. But before we get into that, I wanted to show you my screen thing today, which is a Boeing 777X with the wings folded. This is at a Paris Air Show when it was taxiing out. And I think if I go all the way back, maybe you can see it. Huge engines on this plane. And when it goes out to fly, the wingtip folds down. So it's been a very, very crazy week. I've actually done some flying this weekend. I started out on Thursday and ended on Monday, actually, yesterday. And it is crazy. There are a lot of people traveling, and the airports are just crammed. I went through about 5 airports, and they were all crammed, all full. And it's crazy. So in the last episode, I spoke about the issues that was going on in the eastern part of the United States with all the thunderstorms, air traffic control delays, airlines being understaffed, they canceling flights and everything like that. Today, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about, so if you were caught up in all that, what should you do, right? So the first thing is the airlines have been, well, some of them I think have been really good about it. United have given some people like 30,000 points or miles. I don't know what American has done, and I'm not sure what Delta has done either. But JetBlue, I know for certain, has given passengers $200 credits. But I had some friends who flew JetBlue on 3 separate occasions, and they had a lot of issues. And one of the things I see is, I think the airlines have stretched themselves really thin. Everybody wants to be, oh, look at me. We fly to here, we fly to there. We're going to Paris, we're going to London, we're now international. But I think the problem is that they're not taking care of their core customers. So while some airline was flying to Europe and everything was fine, they were flying to the Caribbean and everything was not fine. One of the insights that I had on this was, because I went to a Caribbean destination where the guy was telling me, so they close at 10 o'clock. It's a car rental. They close at 10 o'clock. And all the flights coming in from JFK on this particular airline were delayed. And so like my friends were trying to get in and they got in, then their flight arrived at like 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Now, so if they're renting from this particular company, they were closed. And what the company did, they said, well, we don't have staffing after 10 because they actually get picked up and taken home by the company and then get dropped off in the morning. So they're open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So all these flights that were delayed, when they came, the places were closed. So then what people had to do was come back the next morning and pick up the cars that they had. Now it gets even better. Because the flights were delayed, people weren't bringing the cars back at the time that they said they would, because they needed the cars because they were delayed more. So they were calling in and they were extending the times that they had with the cars. And so as a result, the company wasn't able to fulfill what they needed to do, which created quite a problem. Because imagine you came in like 2 o'clock in the morning, then you had to get a ride to your hotel, which you had to pay for. Then you had to pay for another ride to come back to the airport so that you could pick up that rental car that the airline that they had for you. So this created problems all around, and it was a mess. So when the airlines give you a voucher of like $200, oh yeah, or give you miles and say, oh yeah, you can come back and find me, that's not going to cover all the expenses that you had outside of that. I think in some cases they give them meal vouchers, but in an airport like JFK, they got a $12 meal voucher. That can't really buy anything in those airports these days. So I am going to talk about travel insurance again, But I'm going to tell you what you can do in terms of travel insurance. So stay tuned. Okay, so here are my tips for you when you're out there. Everything you book with an airline, they give you an option for travel insurance. Now, the travel insurance that would have worked for you for these travels possibly, is trip delay insurance. So you need to make sure that whatever you're buying has trip delay insurance. What that does, that says, hey, if your trip is delayed for a specific time, then expenses that you have up to a certain amount are covered. So for example, I think some of them actually have 12 hours, some have 6 hours. And so if, let's say your trip was delayed 6.5 hours and you bought food and drinks, then they'll cover it up to a certain amount. Maybe if your trip was, say, delayed 12 hours and then you had to overnight somewhere and you had to pay for a hotel room, they'll reimburse your hotel room up to a certain amount. So make sure you know what you're buying. There is trip insurance from the airline that you're traveling with, and there's trip insurance that you can buy yourself. You can go to passradar.com/travel insurance, and that will give you information about travel insurance there. Or the credit card that you use to buy the travel transaction, oftentimes will have some sort of travel insurance on it. Now, make sure you read the policy, because some of them, again, depends on the type of card, like American Express, depending on whether you have the gold or the platinum or the black, your coverage is different. And so what you have to do is make a claim. Now, you can't double dip. So if the airlines gave you something, the travel insurance may not give you anything because you've already been compensated. Again, it depends on how much you've been compensated. So they may ask you, well, how much did the airlines give you? And if you say, well, they gave me a $200 voucher, but my expenses were $400, then they may give you the difference between what you're covered for and what you got. You're not going to get double. So there's no double dipping on there. Matter of fact, when you go to the website, the first thing they tell you is, did you contact the airline to see what they will give you? Some airlines will give you something, some won't give you anything. The other thing to do is be smart about how you travel. So as an example, I had a flight at 7:45 and I knew there was another flight at 5:45 and I knew there was going to be issues. So I got to the airport early enough. I was there like 4:30 to try to stand by for that I think it was 5:35 a.m. flight. As it turns out, though, I went to the counter. The line for elites were long. Well, it wasn't even long. There was like 2 people there, and I was the next person. But the lady was dealing with like 4 people, and she was on the phone, and I'm like, this is taking way too long. So I went to the kiosk because I wanted to print my boarding pass also. And that's another thing. I always print my boarding pass. And the reason is that sometimes you get to the machine and the app won't load because you don't have an internet connection. Magically, as soon as you need it, you don't have it. And so if you have the paper one, you can use it. So I always make sure I get the paper. So I went to the thing, printed the paper, and I said to the guy I wanted to get on a standby list because the app wouldn't allow me to do it. And he says, well, you just go to the gate. So I was like, okay, well, I was trying to go to the agent here so I get in the list because there was a cutoff. So I get through security, which was actually long. Like it's the longest I've ever seen TSA pre at the airport. And there was also the clear and the TSA pre lines were the same length. Ridiculous. But the line for people who are non-TSA pre and clear was even longer. The lines on 2 sides of the airport was actually touching each other almost. Ridiculous. So this gives an idea of how many people are coming to the airport. And this is 4:45 in the morning. So I get through security eventually, and I go straight to the gate. I get to the gate and I told her, I said, look, I wanted to get on standby for the 5:35. I'm on the 7:45, but and she goes, well, you're too late. You're 2 minutes too late. I go, what? She said, no, you can't go on the thing. I said, well, she goes, you should have done it at the counter. I said, I tried. I said, the lady was there, but she was on the phone with 4 people in front of her, and there was one person in front of me. And so I spoke to one of the agents and they said, come up to the gate. And she goes, okay. And so she put me on the list. A few minutes later, I get a seat because people don't want to get up for a 5:35 a.m. flight. That's just how it works. So, and I knew that, right? So, but that flight I've actually gone on full many times. The other thing too is that I was on American Airlines. They kept sending me little notices to say that my flight was oversold, and if I wanted to go on a later flight, I could. They were offering a maximum of $700. Now, what they do is you say the amount that you want, and they take the lowest bid. No one's going to bid $300 on those flights. Everyone's going to bid the highest number. I mean, wouldn't you? So what happens is that if they need your seat, then they will, compensate you accordingly. Now, the problem with these flights, I looked at the flights. Getting to my destination was next to impossible if I didn't get on that early flight. But I put myself out there anyway, because sometimes when you see availability, the airlines have a different availability than what you're seeing in the external system. Most airlines have what you call last availability, so which means that they end up selling the last seats themselves. So if you go to an online agency and it shows there are no seats available on a particular flight, and you go to the airline, oftentimes they have seats available because they have what's called last seat availability rights. So when I went to her, she knew, and I said to her, I'm just trying to help because I know today is not going to be a good one. And she goes, okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. So I think that's why she ended up putting me on the standby list anyway. Now, the ticket I had said I could do same day standbys, but the system wasn't showing me any connections. I think it might have been because this flight would have gotten me in like 3 hours instead of, I don't know how the algorithm works, but whatever it wasn't working. And that's the thing about the automated systems, right? So the airlines, the automation is just ridiculous. Like trying to speak to a person is almost non-existent these days. So they make everything is based on the automation. Well, sometimes the automation don't work. You try to change something, it doesn't change. And I know the same day standby works because I've seen it. Problem is though, when all the flights are full, you need a person to do it because a person knows better than the computer. So all the computers saying, oh, there's no ticket available in this thing. Meanwhile, agents like, you know what, I need to get you out of here right away. So I'm putting you on this flight. And also, people don't show up and things like that. But anyway, I got on the early flight, which was good. Got an aisle seat, which is even better. And then I was going to Miami, and I got to Miami, and I'd rather spend 3 hours in Miami waiting than not getting on my flight, which is at 7:45. Whenever I make a decision, I never look back. So I didn't care what happened to that 7:45. I just know that I was on the earlier flight and I was good to go. So that's the thing to think about. Try to see if you can do same day changes if your ticket allows it. If not, just go to the airport, talk to the agents and say, look, I'm trying to help because I know there's an issue and I just want to get out of your hair. And like 9 out of 10 agents will put you on the flight and get you out of their hair because they know that it's going to be easier for them. Because why go out with empty seats on an earlier flight when you know that the later flight is oversold? That means you've sold more tickets than people, then seats are available, and they can't get out. I mean, you're going to be a thorn in their side, so they might as well help you to go. And so I knew that, so I was able to get out. So we talk about the trip delay insurance. Make sure you check on that. There's also trip cancellation. Some of the policies will give you funding if your trip is canceled and you have out-of-pocket expenses. like you have to buy food or you have to stay in a hotel or something like that. It's funny, the things that so I was on a flight and I kept getting these notifications, and one of them said, if you're traveling between the 2nd and the 4th, we can rebook you starting on the 4th. I was like, no, I want to go on the 2nd, and I already have a seat anyway. And it's because, again, there was a lot of when I landed, I was going up to Boston. I landed up to Boston. I landed pretty much in a rainstorm. And it was like a nice, gentle, controlled, way out approach landing. But it was raining. And and Boston was just cloudy the whole time. And so there was a lot of issues out there. So if you have what you need to do, let's say you get nothing. You have no travel insurance. Airline didn't send you a voucher. But you had to spend money out of your pocket and you were delayed for X number of hours. Send them a note, include all the information that you had. If you had to buy whatever you had to buy, include all that, copies of your receipts and stuff, and send it to them, to customer care, and see if they'll give you something, right? I mean, you have nothing to lose. And if the airline compensated you, but you didn't like the compensation, you can always ask for more. And at worst, they can say no. And then, maybe you all meet halfway. So that's kind of what's going on, pretty much in terms of that. Again, I know people hate insurance, but travel insurance was a good thing for this weekend. I have an annual policy, and I hate to be preaching this every time, but this is going to continue happening. And so if you don't protect yourself, then there's no point in yelling and screaming at the agent, because if there's no airplane at the gate, there's nothing that they can do. But and the other thing too is that know your schedules. So if you see that your flight is delayed and you've been there forever, if you can get a ticket on another airline and get yourself out of there, do it. Again, your travel insurance may protect you, and and pay, or the airline will just give you a voucher for the ticket that you didn't fly, and you can use it for future flight. But don't be a victim, right? Don't sit there and go, oh, the airline this and the airline that, when you could use other options. The other thing too is that sometimes airlines, because here's what happens. If you're in a market where like my friend was in Charlotte, American Airlines is based in Charlotte, but Delta is not. Delta has 3 flights. American has like 20 flights, literally, because they go to LaGuardia, Newark, and JFK in the New York area. So they have a ton of flights. Well, Delta had 3 flights. So if Delta has anything wrong with any of those 3 flights, they're going to try to move all the passengers from the flight that was wrong to the other 2 flights. But American has 20 flights. So because they have so many flights, and it means that you can get on one of those other flights, you just have to ask the airline. Again, sometimes they won't book you on the other flights, but if you insist and say, look, I looked at all your flights and you're telling me that I have to stand by and I may not get on, please put me on another flight because you canceled my first flight. So be nice, be forceful. If you're sitting on the line, and the lines are typically long, because every customer service center I saw over my little weekend, the lines were long. But this is just some ways that you can prepare yourself when you're traveling the next time. Also, do not check a bag unless you have to. Because when you check a bag, even if you take a flight and you have to connect somewhere, your bag's not going to make it. It's just not. Because you can move faster than they can take your bag off the plane and put it on the next flight. So you need to make sure you do not check a bag. That doesn't mean you're going to pack your entire life story in the bag. I saw some people who they had so much stuff in their bag, they couldn't lift it to put it in the overhead bin. That means you packed too much. Of course, some people are older, they can't lift it anyway, but that's a different story. But, there are ways to mitigate what's happening. So I highly recommend that you try to do that. So that's all I have in terms of the kind of aviation meltdown this weekend, but the weather is continuing. It's raining everywhere. The thunderstorms are still out there, and so this stuff is not gonna go away anytime soon. So be prepared. Okay, so the other story I had was I saw something about this where there's a woman on an American Airlines flight and she had a meltdown. And so she apparently thought that somebody wasn't a person. So she got on the flight and she goes, she's like, she looking, the video is very funny. I don't know what's wrong with her, but she thought there was somebody else on the flight. And she goes, I'm telling you, I'm getting the F off, and there's a reason why I'm getting the F off, and everyone can either believe it or they cannot believe it. And she walks to the front of the plane and she's pointing to the back of the plane. And she's like, you can sit on this plane and you can die with them or not. I'm not going to. She continued. And so the flight was made at a gate by local law enforcement, and the customer was removed from the flight. American says we thank their customers for their understanding and our team members for their professionalism in managing a difficult situation. Thank goodness I didn't have any issues on my flight. The other thing was a Hawaiian Airlines flight to Australia had severe turbulence, and 7 people were injured. The thing about this, folks, is that it said the turbulence struck about 5 hours after the plane departed from Honolulu Friday afternoon. So they were in open water at the time. One thing is, please keep your seatbelts on. When the nearly 11-hour flight landed in Sydney, airport medical personnel tended to the injured, which included passengers and crew members. 3 of the injured were released after being assessed on scene, and 4 others were taken for further evaluation. The 3 flight attendants have since been released, and they've been in contact with the passengers, but they weren't able to provide any update as yet. Please be careful. The incident comes months as they had another turbulence. I see people getting up, when the seatbelt sign is on, because to you it's smooth, but whenever the pilots turn the seatbelt on, there's a reason for it. So please keep your seatbelt on. And sometimes there's clear turbulence, right? The seatbelt is off, so you're up gallivanting. If you don't have to be up, sit your butt down and put that seatbelt on. And if you're sleeping, put the seatbelt on, because when the turbulence hit, you are going to go flying. And it's not just you that's going to get injured. You're going to fall and you're going to hit somebody else. So it's not just about you. So please be careful out there. Keep this. It's always interesting. Like, as soon as I hear the plane land, all you hear is click, 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 going through the airplane because people are taking off their seatbelts. We are still on a taxiway, and the pilots may have to stop the airplane really quickly. And you know what? You're going to go flying. And not in a good way. You're going to hit the seat in front of you if they happen to hit the brake. So please keep those seatbelts on. I don't understand why people, especially with children, you have little Johnny sitting up and being all happy, and that baby is going to go flying. So please hold on to the kids. I think that's about it that I had for this week. Just, get travel insurance. I think my friends are actually finally listening to me now, because they recognize that travel is so different these days. I mean, it's very, very, very different. So passrider.com/travel insurance. I have an annual policy, and it works. I get access from Trawick, and I'll put a link to that in there so you can get that if you need to. Yes, I do get a commission, but I'm not just telling you this because I get a commission. I'm telling you because it actually works, and you may need it. That's all I got. This is Kerwin with passrider.com, cruisingaltitude.com, and for what's happening in travel with Kushwa and Kerwin, and we will see you next week. Have a great trip.